Thanks for joining us for tonight's event. My name's Kevin. I'm one of the event hosts here at Powell's Books. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual events by visiting our website at powells.com. We're also doing events in the store now if you live in Portland. And if you don't already do so, please follow us on social medias, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and our YouTube channel. Tonight, we're excited to host Bill Roorbach in conversation with Nina de Gramont. When 16-year-old Cindra is sent to a reform camp in Montana after being involved in an armed robbery, she is thrust into a new world of mountains, cowboys, prayers, and people from all walks of life. At Camp Challenge, she meets Lucky, a camp employee of mysterious origin, an origin of constant speculation, and the chemistry between them is instant and profound. The pair escape together into the wilderness to create an idyllic life far from the reach of the law, living off their resounding love, Lucky's vast knowledge of the wilderness, and a little help from some friends. But they can only run from the outside world for so long, and the consequences of their naive fantasy of a future together and circumstances shaped by skin color will keep them apart for decades. Cindra gets trapped in a relationship, safely suburban, but with a controlling man who claims to be her rescuer. But for Cindra, there will never be another Lucky, and she dreams of one day finding him again. Page turning, full of vivid characters, delicious suspense, and ultimately joy. Lucky Turtle is a big-hearted love story from Bill Roorbach, author of the best-selling novel Life Among the Giants, the classic craft book Writing Life Stories, and several other acclaimed books. Bill will be joined in conversation by Nina de Gramont, who is also the author of many books, most recently The Christie Affair, which is a brilliant reimagining of one of the most talked about unsolved mysteries of the 20th century, and was recently selected by Reese's Book Club. Tonight's event also includes an audience Q&A. You can use that Q&A button that's at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to ask a question at any time. And if someone has asked a question that you'd also like to know the answer to, you can even upvote that particular question. And perhaps most importantly, please support Bill and Powell's by purchasing copies of Lucky Turtle from us. A link to buy those books, as well as a link to buy Nina's books, will be shared in the chat a couple of times tonight. Bill, Nina, we're so happy you could join us tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
Oh, goodbye, Kevin. Hi, Nina. How are you?
I'm doing okay. What a beautiful intro that was. I got chills.
Oh.
I love this book so much that just hearing like Cindra's name or a description of the things that happen just give me the same kind of pang that I get when I hear a person I really love being discussed.
Oh. Someone just wrote me on Facebook and said, "Hoppo, Bill."
Oh.
And I was like, oh, just the same.
Yeah, isn't it great when people, yeah.
Word from the book. Sorry, you have to read.
So I've written a little study guide here for you, but my first question is personal, and I think I know the answer, but maybe you'll surprise me. Are you a stage fright person, or are you a blossoms under a spotlight person?
I am a anticipatory anxiety person. And my friend Lauren and I call it being in the weird. And so I'll be in the weird kind of all day before an event. I've been doing quite a few events, so it's softening a little bit. But I love once I'm here doing it, I'm fine. I'm not sure I blossom. I mean, that sounds like like breaking out in acne or something. But that doesn't happen, as you can clearly see. My skin is fine.
Clear as the summer stream, mountain stream. So I guess the book is love story, is so moving, and like Kevin said, page turning and wise. I wanted to talk, the first question I have for you has to do with kind of a possibly faulty memory of mine. About 18 months ago, you and I were going for a walk in Maine.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember that you told me that you'd written the book and put it aside and came back to it, like almost not remembering that you'd written it. Did I make that up?
No, it's true. Are you, just to cycle back for just a second, stage fright person or?
Oh, me? Yes, I'm a stage fright person.
So
And
I doubly thank you for doing this, because I know it's.
you're welcome. It's my pleasure.
You must
Zoom
be,
makes it a little better. I don't know if you find that Zoom's a little easier.
I don't like it. Yeah, I mean, I like this. So I mean, I'm getting used to it, but you must be getting used to it. You've been doing quite a bit, I imagine. So, and get used to it, really. So that your book is amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
To your
But I'm
question,
always terrified. And I have this strategy now where I just tell, especially if I'm in person, and those events are few and far between. So I sort of start off by just saying, essentially, hello, I'm terrified. That seems to help. And everybody sort of affords me this grace. They're just relieved if I get to the end without fainting or something.
well, they're all terrified too. So,
I
I,
need to remember.
it's like coming to a horror movie. So, but that's a great question, and it's a question that you got it just right. What happened? You remember I got hurt, and I got hurt. I had a traumatic spinal injury and subsequent repair and neurological issues, and I couldn't read for a long time. I couldn't concentrate for a long time. It was worse than that. I didn't remember I'd written the book for almost a year. And one morning I woke up and I was like, what about that book? And I really had finished it. But in that 2 years, the world had changed a little bit. And certainly I had changed a little bit. And then another X number of months went by and COVID came crashing in, which added another layer of strange time and emotional issues to my existing struggle, that I think people all had some of that at least. And yeah, I had to come back to it. And I was like, I couldn't read it because I couldn't concentrate long enough. So in 20-minute increments, I read the book again. And I was like, I think it's but it was different. So I reworked a lot of it in these small increments and then tried it on Kathy Porres, who's my editor. I know you know, she's in the
Here, I saw her in the chat.
I saw her name come up. And hi, Kathy. And I didn't know what else to do because, my writing group had already read it and they read it again and were like, so anyway, that's the long answer. The short answer is, yeah, you remember that correctly. And then somewhere in there, I started clarifying and being able to work more and better. And then with Kathy did buy it and did edit it, and I was able to work on it with more and more concentration until it was just normal work and hard work, but normal. So it's been a hard book in many ways.
Did it feel, was there, I know there are a lot of difficult things surrounding it, but was there any aspect of it that felt like some piece of yourself had given you this great gift when you looked at the story? I'm somebody who hates first drafts. So like the idea that I would come upon this fully formed, just sort of burbling, wonderful novel already under construction seems exciting to me.
It wasn't like that. It was like, it was a mystery. It was just like, is this what I do? It was very strange. My brain wasn't, it was just it's pretty fascinating to be inside that person, but I don't know. And it had changed enough. My thinking in the world had changed enough that I saw it needed lots of things that I then attended to.
Yeah.
I think you're getting at a more interesting question. I wish my neurologist was here because my gosh, she had some interesting things to say about how brains work and what personality really is and who we think we are and stuff, and how it's all just something we construct and reconstruct and reconstruct. And boy, she was interesting. So we would have long conversations that would make all the rest of the appointments late for the afternoons. So, you know, that's what happens in those offices.
Are you one most interesting patient of your neurologist?
I
That's a
doubt it,
big
because
star, I think.
she had some really exciting stories to tell me, you know, I mean, really fascinating. But I won't tell any of those because I want to talk about Lucky.
Well, my first question is about Cindra. I'm a sucker for a love story, and obviously she is a giant romantic. So I wanted to say, like, is Bill Roorbach a romantic? And like, what are some of your favorite love stories, and how are they reflected in the way this story unfolds, and in the way the narrator thinks of the story?
I guess I am. Yeah, I mean, that's always been important to me. And I do love a lot of work that's about, I do love love stories, and I love, you know, I'm the wrong demographic for the stuff I love, so I don't always hear about them. But, you know, you remember that book by Scott Spencer, Endless Love? They made a pretty crappy movie out of it, but.
They've made two crappy movies out of it, but
Up to.
that is, yep. There was a recent remake too, but yeah, I remember it. I love that book. It's
I
brilliant.
mean, it was just a burning love story that all took place in a very short window, and wow, so that's one I think of when you ask. And I think of you know, you know, basically they're all love stories, right? I mean, so Middlemarch is a lot of things, but one of the things it is a love story. War and Peace is a lot of things, but one of the things it is a love story. And then we'll come up to the, you know, more of the present. The Bluest Eye is a lot of things, but it's a love story. You know, just keep it coming. There's very few that you could pick that aren't. You might not land on that as the main thing about a book, you know, but and I'm interested in what makes, you know, those romance novels are really like with the steamy covers and stuff. I mean, I think that'd be a really funny cover for the paperback of like, you know, a hyper muscular Lucky, you know. But those are built on formulas, you know, and you can write 10 or 15 of those a year because it's all, you know, what you're supposed to be doing. So what makes those different? That interests me, you know. And I think that it's because it's love as a formula instead of love as a messy proposition, which is more like what life offers us, you know, love and confusion. Every other emotion gets attached to a love story. And that might be why they're good to write, because you're able to do everything. And if you're writing a business story like the Louis Auchincloss, however you pronounce that name, those are like these big business stories, but someone's in love with money, or, you know, so it's still a love story, right? And the same stuff works. And there's always some like side interest that's that is the protagonist's love life. So I don't know how to talk about it exactly, but when I think of the Odyssey, I don't think of all the war and trouble, but I think of the sirens tied to their posts, and I think of his great wish to get home, you know, and the suitors, and it's the love story is weirdly a huge proportion of the book, you know. I mean, when you go back to it, the war stuff's just 4 or 5 chapters, and then the Penelope part is huge, you know.
Yeah.
If you think of it that way. And what was I just reading? I don't know. And I love the challenge of getting a reader to fall for your characters the way they're falling for each other. So like Remedy for Love, I took these 2 sort of unappealing people, and the project was to get a reader to fall for them just about the time they fell for each other, which meant interesting the reader in something else first, so that they get pulled through, even though the characters were irritating, until the moment you could go, oh yeah, we're good, it's a love story. And I liked them okay. You know? Most readers were like, they liked one or the other better, you know, and we're kind of rooting for one and not the other. And
Um,
not predictably either.
say again.
Not predictably either. Like,
So
yeah.
everyone reads it differently. You know, it's funny that you brought up Endless Love because that narrator, like, I read that book when I was a teenager and I thought it was the most romantic thing I could possibly read. And then I read it again as an adult and I was like, oh, he's a psychopath.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. That's
and
you
and
you
he's a really unreliable narrator. And that's kind of the genius of the book. In Lucky Turtle, I find Cindra, and I mean, maybe this is something along the lines of every person has a different take, but I found her to be so honest and believable. And I don't know if it was because I mean, the one blind spot I thought she had, I'll get to a little later, but I just thought, I don't know how you did it, but she had this ability to sort of see different sides of things and see the whole picture of the world that made me think that she was really a very, very reliable and trustworthy narrator.
what yeah, but what is it about her? She's not really like me exactly, but she is she's very self-effacing without saying anything self-effacing. So you don't get who she is for a long time, like and you only get it via other characters' views of her, that people pay a lot of attention to her, but she hardly knows that. She doesn't see how she uses people, or she doesn't see how she might be a problem in the lives of some of these people who she definitely affects their lives for the worse, I mean, or not her maybe, but because she's in a relationship that culture doesn't approve of, she's pretty glib about that, and I think as readers we see how glib she is, so you can look over her shoulder too, and I think that gives her a little hint of innocence that even though she seems sort of experienced and worldly wise, you realize she's really not, and that she and she makes really bad decisions later in life, or are they decisions? Does she really have any choices at all? I mean, really, does she? I don't know. So,
I mean, she's a kid, right? And I think one of the really smart things you did was give her that retrospective voice. So we get this combination of her 16-year-old brain, but with her, 20 years down the road brain looking back and being able to make comments on the way she's processing things and the privilege she has, and also sort of the way her different privileges put a target on her back. It's so complicated, but when you're reading it, you're not thinking about those complexities in the moment. You're just kind of, or me, tearing through to get the story.
And she's not thinking of them at the time, but the older Cindra is. And then as the present gets feathered into the story, sort of gradually, in the middle section, the present gets feathered in, and then the last section is pretty much the present with some nods to the past. You realize where that voice is coming from. It's coming from now,
Yeah.
and that you're not listening to a 16-year-old, except in a way you are. That's the best self that she likes to be with.
Because that's when she was with Lucky.
Yeah. And what an adventure.
Oh my gosh. I mean,
What
I
trauma.
love an idol. And I think that the way that you wrote that idol was so smart because, the thing about an idol is where's the tension? It's this perfect, calm, beautiful, peaceful, idyllic scene. But you layer in by sort of zooming forward in time and then coming back to us and giving us little hints of what might happen, what's going to happen, but not how. As a reader, you become so attached to that stretch of time and wanting them to stay in this place that you know there's no way they'll be allowed to stay there.
Yeah, yeah. And she knows that too, because it's coming from, it is retrospective. So the telling from the start, the telling has a hint of, it's rueful from the start, you know.
Yeah.
But you can only feel that because she doesn't give away much for a while. Yeah. And I love talking about her like she's completely separate from my thinking, because she really lifted herself away from my keyboard, you know, just became this person. So.
Well, I'd love to hear, because I mean, I think that's totally true, but I also see I see aspects of you, certainly like your preoccupations in her. And I think like there are certain writers, male writers, who I think are especially good at writing from a women's perspective. I think Peter Cameron's great at it, and Tom Perrotta's great at it. I think you're great at it. And I know when I wrote a book years ago that had a teenage boy as one of the narrators, I ran to you for help with that voice. So how did you, like, where did you find it? And like, was it always exclusively narrated by her, or was there ever a draft where you had other voices coming in?
That's pretty funny. I had Lucky's voice coming in for a while, and it was a good thing to do to help teach me, you know, about him. But it really didn't work and couldn't work. And I'm glad that that's gone. It did teach me a few things. I don't know. I think I just like women, and I've paid attention to them for a long, long time, from having sisters and a very, very, very wonderful, troubled mother, though, who I've just learned a lot from about that, being a woman, I think. And then my sister, who is gay, said, she always said this, you are the biggest dyke. She says, I don't know what that means, but I took it as
it's a compliment, I think.
I took it as a huge compliment, and I don't know exactly what it means. And I hope that isn't offensive to say that, but she said it. So I'm simply quoting my sister, my little youngest baby sister. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I love the compliment. I appreciate it. Thank you. But I have no clue exactly what's going on there. To me, it was just, I'm just writing a person. I mean, it's just it's a voice, you know, first person voice. I feel like I trust in my humanity to stretch into all humans. And obviously there's stuff I need to know about women. So when women read my writing group and other friends read the early drafts, my editor's a woman, you know, everyone had a little something to say, you know, like, I'm not sure, this doesn't feel right, you know, like, and I would just pay attention to that, you know. It's like being in a relationship, right? You got to listen and make some corrections, perhaps, you know, or you can just say, wait, I think you're wrong, but I can't, it's on me, because I can't let the book I can't let you read it like this. So there's something I left open, let you make this misreading. So how can I shift so that you can't read it that way, you being that kind of reader. So there's a lot of that going on, because there's a lot of difference in the book, you know. So it took a lot of introspection and a lot of correction and a lot of advice to get things right, I think, you know. So I think there's
I know for those of you watching at home, I have also worked with Bill's amazing editor, Kathy Corries. And I think she's so great at just sort of getting to the heart of things in a scene that my psychology blocked out for whatever reason.
That's right. And as writers, we have our blind spots, you know. So things in mirror are closer than they appear, you know. So we have to. It's really helpful to have friends and readers give you some thoughts. And it's also, it's really important to still have boundaries. You know, you don't just take all advice from anybody, because they also have blind spots.
Yeah. I've developed this trick where if I'm really fighting with an editor over a line or something they want me to change, I'll change it, and then in the page proofs, I'll sneak it back in the way I want it, because I know, sorry, Kathy, there aren't that many, maybe just a sentence or two, but I know that most editors probably don't go back and read it after the page proofs.
I think they do, and Kathy goes, okay, I know. Kathy says in the comments. Well, we've shared another editor, Susan Campbell.
Oh yeah.
The late fabulous Susan Campbell, and Susan in Temple Stream, she'd go like, Bill, let's put this part. This is great information. Let's put this in a footnote. Let's put this in a footnote. And I'm like, a footnote? Oh yeah, people love footnotes. We're just gonna do this. And we had footnotes all the way through this manuscript. And then at the very last second, she goes, Bill, let's cut the footnotes. So she got rid of all the stuff she didn't want with this little trick, you know. So Kathy, don't listen to that. That was cruel behavior.
Susan's brilliant. I find Kathy much more diplomatic and gentle.
Yeah, and not doctrinaire either. So
yeah.
And Kathy says too late. I don't even know what we're talking about anymore. So what else you got for me? You know, I'm in New York. I'm visiting my daughter. I'm doing some business stuff. I'm doing the thing, and I don't have a copy of the book with me. So
so you can't read it.
I have the manuscript on this computer, so I can go find the little bit I want to read if we want to do that at some point.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I wonder if some of the questions that I have will bring up. I was thinking about you and your feelings about like authority and parents, and how Cindra's parents and parents in general are used in the book. I have really complicated feelings about Cindra's father. I know she adores him, but that was the one sort of emotional response that I found I questioned in her. Like, she didn't see how he was complicit in a lot of the things going on.
Oh, he's
so, I wonder what your thoughts were about that.
So codependent with this powerful woman who's her mother. I don't think she enters into the codependency. I mean, she's able to push. That's necessary, it seems to me, because it helps account for the behavior that gets her into the pickle that she's in at the beginning. You know, she's rebellious, and there's good reason for it. You know, but yeah, he's like really a weak guy. You know, I mean, from what we can see of him, even though she says she adores him, but she's the one who's telling us about him, so she clearly sees some of the. But she doesn't want to credit anything her mother might have said, you know, about him. You know, she knows her mother really doesn't care for the guy. So,
right.
Yeah, that's an interesting problem. And then, you know, you can't make any leap from these parents to mine, for example, because they're really not like mine. Although when I was in high school, I was not in trouble the way she's in trouble, but I was a handful, and I was, you know, my mother had 5 kids, and she was always struggling. So she sent me out to Montana to stay with my uncle, who she hoped would straighten me out. So I spent 3 summers there with him. I love the guy. I thought, oh shit, a summer with Jesus, you know, but it turned out he was very, he was very rebellious, and his ministry, to him, the ministry was, he'd go out to the parks and find the people in trouble. At the time, they were called hobos and drifters and lots of things like that. And he'd go find the people who needed help. A lot of them were teenagers. They were homeless. They were just like, and so there was one kid. He had lots of projects that were humans. You know, he cared little about the Sunday sermon and stuff, except he'd get up there and say, we're gonna go to the park and do some cleaning up, and we're gonna find people that need you know, we're gonna find some apartments, and if anyone has stuff they can donate, like that kind of guy. I mean, he was really, really a person full of love, you know. So he assigned me sort of to a guy who called himself Kills the Sky. That wasn't his real name. My uncle was constantly saying, that's not his real name. You know, he's created his own identity. I was like, that's his name. If he says it's his name, you know. But he introduced me to him in the park. When I remember his face was cut open. He was constantly in fights. He was he had an apartment with his girlfriend who was 14, and they had a 2-year-old baby. So figure that one out. Maybe she was 15 by the time I found it. So, but they, you know, it was not my uncle was the only thing he had. His mother had died. It was the first drug overdose I'd ever heard of, you know, being a sheltered kid. I mean, I'd heard of it, but I mean, someone's mother, you know, that was really different. And he was a person of indeterminate origin. My uncle had theories because he knew his mother, but the mother also was similar. And he was a ferocious, angry, terrifying presence, except that I really liked him. And he had this philosophical side that if I could get him somewhere away from where people were yelling at him, he was constantly being harassed, including by the police. If there was any fight, if he was beaten up, nothing would happen to those who did it to him. If he prevailed, he'd get arrested, you know. And I really I was innocent, but I started noticing how different it was walking along with him. I never had people shouting at me as I walked along the street, and it was like everybody shouted at him, and stuff like that. But he and I, in front of my uncle, would talk a lot about, let's go to the wilderness, and we could totally survive. And he was like, oh yeah, we could survive, no problem. You know, it would be an ideal world for us, you know. And my uncle's like, all right, all right. So my uncle drove us out to Bob Marshall Wilderness, which it's 1 million acres. And he drove us, you know, if I had done this 20 years ago, I would still remember the name of the road he dropped. I can't remember much of it now, but he dropped us on this road and said, I will meet you guys in 2 weeks at such and such camping something, you know, something like that. And it was miles and miles and miles and miles away. And he gave us no compass or anything like that. And lucky, I'm not lucky, I'm doing it. Kills said, what's the direction? You know, my uncle's south-southwest. And he goes, all right. And my uncle said, so this is something that's in the book. My uncle said, keep track of the days, because the first thing you'll lose is the days, you know. So I'm going to meet you in 2 weeks, and if you're not there, I'm going home, you know. So off we went. He gave us those old canteens with the canvas covers, you know. Remember those? And we each got a pack of fish hooks and a leader line, which is fly fishing leader material. No fishing rods, but just the leader material, and whatever clothes we were wearing. Lucky had Kills had
just keep calling him Lucky. I'm going with that, Bill.
For good reason I can't call him Lucky. So Kills, but it's obviously conflated in my mind a little bit. But he had this big knife, so we had that, and off we went. And I was not nervous about it, but I was very good at fishing, and I was able to provide fish almost every day. And of course, Kills was very good at fishing, but also he could find stuff to eat everywhere, anywhere. He was amazing, and he little shelter, and if it was chilly, he'd figure out a way to make a coat for us, and we're walking along wearing big bark jackets. You know, it was really incredible. And it was 2 weeks.
You just drink the water there?
Yeah, that's I never thought about that. You just drank the water, yeah, and nothing bad came of it. And it was dry. It was high summer in Montana, so it was warm enough, and it didn't rain. I bet you it didn't rain at all. And the stars, you know, just bright, clear, starry nights. And yes, we saw the bears, and we saw everything. You know, he was anyway. But what we did was we talked and talked and talked, and the guy was a philosopher. You know, I mean, he was a very original thinker, and he was so beautiful to talk to. With the fury was not there. I mean, because there was no one yelling at him, and I was very accepting of the guy. And we had the most beautiful couple of weeks with not a single battle for him in his life of daily battle. So he could be the gentle philosopher, the wise wilderness. He was a sage. The guy was incredible. And then we get back to town and it all starts up again. And I left. And the next summer when I came, I went out to hang out to find him. And again, it was in the, and he was a little different. He'd gotten into more dangerous stuff. It's harder to hang out with, more furious, less interested in going out in the wilderness. And then by the third summer when I went back, he was unapproachable, you know, and he'd gotten in some very serious trouble when he was hanging out with people. It was dangerous, you know, it wasn't safe for me to be with him. He was really a problem. But that philosopher was still inside there. I knew that, you know, so we still had our little handshake thing that we'd invented. And so, you know, so maybe my uncle and I wrote letters for years after that. And he wrote me a letter. It might have been 10 years later, or 8 years later. I don't know how long. And he said, I don't know if you remember. And he said the real name of the guy. Well, the real name is Kills the Sky. The other name was the name that, you know, someone gave him, but he had rejected that. So I try to never say it, you know. But he always said, never say my name, you know. So I'm violating that. I don't know why. I'm violating that. It was some philosophical thing, you know, that we
But
had.
it's such a fascinating genesis to this story because Cindra's born in 1980, right? So this is happening like in the mid-late 90s.
Yeah.
When these kind of camps were proliferating. And one of the things that was really interesting to me was how, you know, there's this sort of ostensibly sending these kids to the wilderness, but they're so vulnerable because who's going to believe these like supposed bad kids? It's so rife for mistreating them. And when they really start getting the experience that lets them do what supposedly the school would do for them, it's when they escape and are out there
Oh,
on
nice.
their own.
Yeah, nice. Well, you know, original draft, it was 60s, which it was for me. And at some point I realized this in the second life with the book, that it would just make them too old to develop the ending I wanted to develop, you know, to have them be like almost 70, like I am now. Just wouldn't have worked the same way. So that's when I shifted to the 90s. And yes, the 90s, there was the proliferation of these camps, but they existed back then and they weren't much different. So anyway, my uncle wrote me and said, your friend, his name, he's dead. He was beaten to death in a he was beaten to death. So so with the book, I think it took me a while to figure this out. I'm just figuring it out. I think what I've done is just bring him back to life, but only brought back to life the part that was the gentle philosopher, the guy who in his happiest incarnation, who was not living in his fury and living in the results of terrible trauma, continuous terrible trauma. Somehow Lucky's a guy who can process all that and stay gentle and be the good kills, you know, so to speak, and the guy I loved. So I brought him back to life, and also redeemed him, you know, like let him be like in a different world, in a different set of circumstances. He could have been, I mean, what would he have been? It would have been, I mean, he's one of the smartest people I ever talked to. So I let Lucky be that and let Lucky live without the fury, you know, because that rage destroyed him.
I want to give the audience a chance to ask some questions. So this might be too involved a question to ask at this juncture, but I am really interested in, and obviously don't want to give anything away, but I think the book, one of the things that makes the book so generous is the ending. And I wonder if you can talk about how you construct a book to work toward an ending that seems inevitable. That's way too long a question for right now, isn't it?
No, I can do a quick answer though, which is the original draft had a very dark ending. And I think Kathy helped me understand this, but it's not a time for a dark ending.
Yeah.
And not for me either. After getting hurt and getting repaired, I was ready to bring it to a more joyful, and that's so much of Lucky's heart, is the joyous heart. So, but I don't want to give any spoilers.
Yes. No.
Is it a tragic ending or is it not? Yes,
It's generous.
Need it to find out. An order from Powell's Books of Portland, Oregon, the other Portland. I got to plug my computer in because I just realized Zoom uses up all the power. So I'll be around here in my hotel room.
Here, I'm gonna look. I've been blocking out the chat, so it won't distract me.
Okay. Yeah. I'd love to hear any observations or questions people might have. I'll probably have to sit in some awkward spot to do this.
All right. Some stranger named Juliet Carlson wants to know if you can talk about your experiences with the sensitivity readers. It's so interesting and pertinent to our times. And I noticed that you thanked them in your acknowledgement, so I imagine they were helpful.
Well, I had a lot of people all the way along, friends and acquaintances and people more worldly than I. Reading and giving me ideas and challenge me on various things. So that's part of it. And I never would have called them sensitivity readers, but certainly that's what they were. And the official one is, the official ones were very helpful. And one of them especially, who identified herself as a Black woman reader, she wanted to be called a Black woman. And she is a professor and a novelist herself, and she started by praising the book and really talking about it as a novel, and not leaping into the things she's assigned to do, which is very helpful in terms of my defensive response, if any. I saw that she appreciated what I was doing. And she wrote a long description of what I was doing and how she loved it. And she said, one wonderful thing is you have a lot of Black characters and they're all really different from each other and they're just real characters. So that's the main thing I would look for. But as a Black woman, there were 10 or 12 things that bugged me. Or that made me uncomfortable, I think she said. And I'd like to tell you what those are. And I don't think you need to change them unless you want to, but I think you need to know that as a Black woman, some of these things gave me pause. And then she really carefully went into the manuscript and said, on this page, this passage, this is what bothered me, and here's why, a little anecdote from her life, and then back to and just really teaching me some things. And I did take all of her suggestions and figured out ways and she even suggested ways to correct some of them. I mean, she was a great teacher and editor, but she knew what her assignment was. And in the end, just helped me make better characters and make a better book. And it was just the most helpful possible thing. So
the book is just filled with so many beautiful people. And I love the transformation that Francie goes through when she's living out there in the wilderness with them. And I think, to me, the most devastating line in the whole book is when she says, I didn't know white people could love.
A friend of mine said that to me many years ago. Many years ago, I play music, and had several played in bands with several Black musicians, and one of them said that one night. We're just having drinks. Somehow the conversation got deep, and someone that night had yelled something out that he had taken offense to, and we were discussing that, and then we just got into things he perceived about me, or things that, was he right, did I believe, and we came down to that line, and he started talking about how, and I guess I'd never seen it that way, but that how hurt he was by this stuff. It was just a different way to see it. I'm like, oh, hurt. And that was an amazing line. Yeah. So eventually, so here it's appeared, it's found its way into a book. He and I were in Jamaica together, and on a vacation. Juliet was there too. And the Jamaicans, it was a great moment again, because the Jamaicans were all like, he and I were the same. We were Americans.
Oh, yeah, interesting.
At home, we were Black guy and white guy, but in Jamaica, we were the Americans. So we went around together as the same thing for a couple of weeks. Pretty cool. Lesson for me. It was no lesson to him, but for me, it was a big deal.
So one of my very brilliant students has a question in the Q&A. Jana Carver asks, I'm really curious as to how stories typically come to you. For example, my story ideas usually start out as imagined conversations and characters, situations, and unfold from there. When a story comes to you, what do you discover first?
Oh, I like that, character situations. They're all different for me. Lucky started with those high school summers that were a deep part of my psyche, and I couldn't find a way into them. I did a little here and there. I mentioned it in nonfiction. That wasn't working. So this particular book has been with me a long time, and I think I had a dream where I got the name Lucky Turtle, and that somehow that freed me. I don't know how. I don't know. Don't know what the answer is. But other books completely different, where sometimes it's just almost purposeful. I'm like, let me think of a situation, and I'll introduce a problem, and. Yeah, like Remedy for Love, I was standing in line at the grocery store, and the young woman in front of me couldn't pay, didn't have enough for all the stuff she'd bought, and I offered some money. She refused it, and then I see her out and leaving the place with just 20 grocery bags hanging from her fingers, and it's snowing, and she's walking. And this is Western Maine, where there's no sidewalks. It's just. And I said, "Would you like a ride?" Of course, she's smart and said, "No, I don't want to." I was like, "Really? Do you want a ride? It's okay." And I gave her a ride, 7 miles or something. She was going to walk. They'd lost their truck because he lost his job, and I dropped her at her house. And driving away, I see her waving like this, and. I was going, oh, look at that. She's just so grateful. She's waving so enthusiastically. And then I get home and realize her groceries are still. So that became the germ of, that's very different though. That wasn't some deep heart thing. That was an anecdote that just got me thinking, about the easy crash from comfortable life to disaster that's our country makes. So, and every other possible way. The question is a good question, but there's no one answer, and not for me. Every story is totally different, and yet the same.
Patricia Sellinger asks, having not read the book, can you tell the significance of the title?
Yeah, Lucky Turtle is the protagonist's name. Cindra is the protagonist really, but she's and the narrator, but her love interest is Lucky Turtle. It's his name, and became the name of the book. And then as far as significance, there's a lot. So that's the part. It would probably be a bad idea to limb all that out. But when you read it, you can find all sorts of ways to think about how lucky this turtle really is, and how turtles have to live. Something like.
David fed me this great question that I didn't get to, so he's reminding us of it here. Mishner was strong medicine. Can you talk about like how Hawaii made its way into the book as this kind of sacred text?
Do you mean David Gessner, your helpful, humble husband?
My simple, humble helper man, yes.
Helper. Well, that's a very humble question, David, and I appreciate it. Hawaii was a favorite book of mine in like maybe junior high school. It's like 10,000. It's this huge, fat book. And I lived in that book and I loved it, but I was like probably 12 or 13 or something. And I probably read it 8 times. I just thought it was the best thing ever. And only later did I realize and learn, like I think college, some professor goes, that stuff's trash. Mishner is a pop writer, and I learned that fatal distinction, that I've been unlearning ever since, the idea that entertainment is some kind of sin. How did it get in there? So I just loved it, and I thought it's the kind of thing that would have entertained them a lot, in a world where they had absolutely no outside entertainment, and it just gave me a way to bring in some outside world into their very closed wilderness idyll. I like that word, idyll. But then another character comes in, like the college professor, and tells them that it's trash, but she doesn't buy it.
We always ruin things.
So that's where it came from. Yeah.
So Kayla Margaret asked, have you had to struggle with the embarrassment of presenting your work to your friends? Do you ever get over it?
Oh, yeah, I think you get over it to some degree. I remember kind of hiding it. I would pretty much hide my writing when I was first writing. I wouldn't tell friends really, or they'd know I was doing something, but I would never show it to them. And I would do the dumbest thing, which is I'd write things and not show a single soul, except I'd send it to the New Yorker. It's not that different than if I walked up to the New York Philharmonic and said, I would like to audition for a concerto concert, So that was just dumb. And then it took a long time. I like embarrassment's an interesting word to use. At first I didn't know what you meant, and now I know exactly. Yes, I know what you mean. Yes, you get over it. You gain some confidence. You realize that, and you learn how to do it better. So there's less to be embarrassed about. And eventually you learn that the flawed drafts you're producing are more accessible to advice. And so they're really good to give people who might have some advice for you. And once they're polished real hard, it's harder for someone to crack the polish and give you the advice you need. Polish is a pretty dangerous thing.
I remember once I was driving with a friend and I had a stack of stories like for a workshop later on. And he like bent to pick one up and I almost crashed the car, like trying to like cover it up and rip it out of his hands. And he said, Nina, if you publish a book, you're not going to be able to like run into bookstores and rip the book out of people's hands if they want to read it.
Yeah, yes, like college creative writing classes helped a lot, and then grad school helped a lot because you are being read, and so that's why those programs are so important. I think at least one reason. The other good reason is that it just gives you time to be and think as a writer among other people who are trying to be writers, and that's a good milieu for a couple of years.
Bill, since you're also a musician, have you had to put together a playlist for Lucky Turtle? Like, did you write something for A Large Hearted Boy or for any other reason, do a playlist?
Yeah, I just did it. It'll be up March 9th on Large Hearted boy.com, which is a site where he sort of integrates writers and musicians, and it's a pretty cool site. Just look at it. It's fun to look at for anything. But okay, because it's the 90s, I like, I still play sometimes. And I play with this guy named John Boy Nemo, who's kind of a brash guitar player dude. And we were having a rehearsal and he's just calling songs and everyone knows him, but I don't know him. And he's like, "Are you one of those old guys that missed the 90s?" Like, yes, that's me. So when I had to do a playlist that was from the 90s, because that's when the book is from, all I know is like Sarah McLachlan, and I know she's not that hip, and maybe a couple of others. Alanis Morissette, I think that gave me a little tiny bit of streak. So I went to a friend who is a woman of the 90s and a very hip, wonderful. And I said, can you help me with this? And she got excited and made a whole playlist. So then the essay I wrote was about how I couldn't do it. So I asked her to do it and she did it. So it's really her playlist.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, but I said, you do it as Cindra though, like you don't do it as you, because you're so hard edged and Cindra's a little less maybe worldly, So that worked. So it'll be up March 9th, and you can see songs I've never heard of in my own playlist.
Everybody else who's ever written something for him is going to be like, "Oh my God, why didn't I think of that?" Instead of racking my brain. Oh, okay. Were you sad to give away your tickets to the Met Gala tonight?
I am actually at the Met Gala right now. I'm actually in the men's room at the Met Gala. Is it tonight? Oh, golly. All right. Maybe that's why there was no opera tonight. Oh, okay.
Malcolm Bates was the very sophisticated asker of that question.
Oh, Mac. He's my brother-in-law. That's hardly fair. But he does live in the Pacific Northwest. So I think it's legit. So we'll give him that. But look where I am. I can unplug this computer. This is, I don't know if you can see. All you can see is a reflection.
You see the lights.
I got to turn off the lights, but I'm in Chinatown at this hotel that's really pretty nice with a spectacular view of downtown, caught in the fog right now. Last night there was a giant thunderstorm and lightning was hitting the tops of like the New World Trade Center building and literally hitting those antennas, 3 or 4 times. Explosive. It was so dramatic at 3:30 in the morning.
Gotta love New York.
Yeah, it's a very New York thing. So cue the Gershwin. Da, 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 da.
Bill, can you remember if Kim and Kevin are going to come back, or are we supposed to? Oh, wait, do I see them?
Oh, they are right there.
Hi.
Yeah,
No,
I thought the Gershwin was my cue to come in.
I think it could
Yeah.
be. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Bill and Nina. Thanks for being part of this event tonight. I just posted a link to Lucky Turtle in the chat there. Please click on that and you can buy it from us. This event was recorded and it will show up on our YouTube channel sometime tomorrow, as all of our Zoom events the past couple of years have been recorded and posted on that page. And I just posted the link to the YouTube channel there. Click on that and check that out, because there's lots of really great talks with many authors on that page.
Some incredible talks. Yeah.
Really great. And now I have to go sign off, and I have to go host the event in the store tonight.
Wow.
So it's a very eventful evening in the Met Gala and everything. So you better get down to the Met Gala, Bill.
I'm there. I'm actually in the men's room.
There's Bill's book right there. Lucky Turtle, beautiful.
That beautiful cover.
There's Nina's book too.
Look at that beautiful cover.
Got the Reese sign of approval. All right. Thanks everyone at home for watching. Thanks again, Bill and Nina. And everyone have a great night.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Good night.
So good to see you.